The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome to the Sunday Paper Review on Off the Ball. John Duggan here. Sitting in for Joe Malloy. We hope you're doing okay around the country this Sunday morning and lunchtime. I'm delighted to be joined by the editor of the Journal.ie, Sinead O'Carroll, and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward to review the stories of the day. Sinead, Johnny, how are you getting on?
How are you?
Good.
Your Munster game, Sinead, yesterday?
Yeah, I'm probably one of, definitely rugby-wise, the best atmosphere I've ever been to.
That is a big statement.
And I saw some people comparing it to New Zealand in November, and I was at that game, and the atmosphere there was good, and again, for rugby it was very good, but this one was more akin to like a big All-Ireland football final is how I felt like it was. And it was probably the only time I've understood when people say, you know, there was a 16th man. They say that all the time about Thomond. And I have gone to games down in Thomond, but this, and the quarter-final was big, or the last 16 was big, but this was, it was something kind of special, and it did have that feeling that it could have been special and that there was this 16th man playing.
We spoke about this pre-show, like, JD, it's like it took the Munster fans to come to Lansdowne to make an atmosphere.
What does that say?
Well, the atmosphere at Six Nations, like anyone will say, Jerry Thorney wrote about it, wasn't great.
Yeah, no, it wasn't good this year.
Now, the Republic of Ireland has improved. The Portugal game was good. I think the Germany game was the one I remember the most, the Shane Long game. So I think with the Republic of Ireland, I don't see an issue, but I haven't been to a Six Nations game recently.
Well, actually, I live very close to the Aviva, and you can hear when there's football on, you can hear it from my house. When there's rugby on, you can't.
That's very interesting.
So that's probably telling as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, no, it was I think Munster just tried to play it out, and there was just 10 minutes too much for them to play it like that. But it did feel, there was a moment where someone from Toulouse fumbled the ball, and I looked up and I thought, God, that is the 16th man working here. Like, it was really difficult for them to play in, even with all the advantages they have. But just those few minutes too long.
What was the atmosphere like during the penalties? That must have been a strange vibe.
Yeah, and actually it's in the papers today. It kind of became completely odd. You could see even the players were being very nice to each other. Like Joey Carberry had, they were kind of hitting each other on the shoulders, like from opposition teams. It was quite flat then, because a lot of people actually around us didn't know how it was going to work. They didn't know if there was going to be just 3 kicks, if there was going to be 5, if there was going to be 6.
Yeah.
So, it's the second time it's happened in 3 decades. So people weren't sure how it was going to work. So that there was a lot of people like looking up phones, talking to each other, and then, there's always someone with authority who says this is how it's going to happen, but they weren't right. And then obviously with the missed kicks so early on, and then Toulouse didn't even really know how to celebrate at the end. They eventually kind of lined up and found some fans and jumped up and down. But it was, I think everyone felt, and in the papers across today, there's the analysis that no one wants to blame anyone, because it's such a weird way of finishing a game. They had to do it that way, I guess. The tries were equal, so they have to find some way of doing it. But it definitely, didn't have the atmosphere, say, of a penalty shootout for sure.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go through the back pages on your Sunday. So the Sunday Times Sports Supplement, we have hanging by a thread. Diaz grabs a point, but Liverpool's quadruple hopes are in doubt. So the 1-1 draw against Tottenham yesterday, and Munster missed out to Toulouse and shootout, as Sinead was talking about there, and Rangnick sorry after humiliating hammering. So this was absolutely shocking for Manchester United, a 4-0 defeat at Brighton, and the players are already on their summer holidays in their heads, like just awful stuff if you're a Man United fan. And Kingdom Rule, Kerry beat Cork in Munster semi-final 23 points to 11. The back of the Sunday Independent, the sports section there, we have last men standing. Heartbreak for Munster, but Leinster book semi-final place. Paul Kimmage Becker's trials and tribulations, we'll get to that. And Liverpool stumble, Spurs but dent in title hopes. We have the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. Pure agony, Munster's dreams dashed by following champions from the penalty shootout. Clinical Kerry, rebels fade after early resistance as Kingdom's class kicks in. And huge blow for Liverpool as nervy draw at home to Tottenham spurs on City. And Katie will struggle to top her New York magic. So Manchester City against Newcastle today, live and off the ball on News Talk. The Sunday World. What in Christ? Awful United are now a laughing stock for Ron. So Cristiano Ronaldo caught laughing. We don't know what he was laughing at, but it was a shocker. Cristiano Ronaldo could only look on and laugh as his own Man United teammates, after their disastrous season, hit rock bottom last night as they were thrashed 4-0 by Brighton in the Premier League. And also foregone conclusion about Liverpool, and hard task for Guardiola to Pep up players. Be easier now after the Liverpool draw against Spurs last night. Sunday Mirror, we have King Luis, strange headline really. Diaz rescues a point, but City take title advantage. Ronaldo's big talks with Fergie, so apparently they've been having cups of tea, Cristiano Ronaldo and Alex Ferguson. But it's a penalty paying for Munster. And Tiger Feet, Leinster into the last four again. They'll play Toulouse at the Aviva Stadium next weekend. We'll find out the day and the time tomorrow. We have the Sunday People. Ronaldo in secret talks with Fergie. Merseyslide, City in pole position after Sunstrike puts the brake on Liverpool title charge. Chelsea welcomed the hand of Todd Bailey, the new owner, who was kind of in the cameras quite a lot yesterday. And Stan Collymore, sorry Pep, but you're a Euro failure in my book. So that's the definitive verdict from Stan Collymore on Pep Guardiola. Back of the Sun on your Sunday, Sunburn. I like that one. A red hot Spurs star, rocks cop, can't beat a bit of sun. Jack Eyes rebound, Jack Grealish, not the flavour of the month because it gets a hard deal, I think, in the press. If he'd scored, it'd be a different matter, wouldn't it, the other night? Bench power nails are for Kerry 23 points, Cork 11. And we're not fit to wear the shirt, says Bruno Fernandes, not the supporters. Bruno Fernandes said this. So Bruno Fernandes admits Man United's flops. We're not fit to wear the shirt in the loss against Brighton, the 4-0 humiliation. And Jonathan Wilson we'll get to as well. I thought this was good. Outbreaks of chaos expose fatal flaw that keeps denying Guardiola European glory. So that's what's on the back pages of your Sunday papers.
Jonathan Wilson, actually.
Isn't he? Yeah, I think that's probably the best place to start, Johnny. Pep. And it is fascinating, the whole Pep concept.
Well, you touched on Grealish there, JD. Like, I saw criticism. Like, I saw people mocking Jack Grealish on Twitter this week because when Jack Grealish came on, the game was under control. And Jack Grealish goes on and has, like, a really, really good game. He plays really well. If you're talking about XGs, like the one that's cleared off the line goes in any day of the week. And what is the mocking of Jack Grealish? Like, and it's touched on in the papers today. Tommy Conlon's article is interesting about like the Spanish reaction to it. I can't fathom how that game went from Man City, and it's just one of these things. He may go down as a Euro failure or whatever, but like Man City were so good, they had like no shot on target until they scored. Real, 2 goals in like 2 minutes. It was insane, and I can't put my head around it. Like, it's like
The problem is, if it was just the one-off, it's the pattern. That's the problem. It's the pattern going back to 2011 when you last won a Champions League, when he Messi and Xavi and Iniesta, and it's the pattern, the flurry of goals they keep conceding in games. Monaco, Lyon, Spurs, and then it becomes this big debate.
It's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
The Grealish thing, like whether it's he's just seen as Jack the Lad, bit of a party boy, 100 million quid. I'm sure he works as hard as everybody else, but he's just seen to be labelled. Like the way like Raheem Sterling was labelled for a long time in the British media. He just seems to have got that label. And you're absolutely right. He scores, he's the hero. And now it's, well, what about Grealish? It's a strange one.
He did unbelievably well. Like, it was just pure misfortune. You
but
know,
isn't it as well that he seems like a kind of innocuous player for City for Pep to have bought, like
a free spirit.
Yeah, and like a shiny new thing.
Yeah.
Like rather than like someone who will absolutely fit into
system.
Pep system, Pep structure, how Pep wants his players to be and act. And so I think I found it interesting that Pep himself like name checked him, saying what if Jack Grealish scores those 2 goals? He would be seen obviously as Pep himself would be seen as different, and Jack himself would be seen as different. But interesting that Pep kind of saying, well, you didn't score those 2 goals for me, Jack, did you? You could read that kind of name check in a different way. If you're Jack Grealish and really thinking about those 2 chances, maybe you're thinking, oh, he's putting a bit of blame on me there as well. He might not be. He might be saying, look, I could have gone in, taken off a couple of players, put Jack Grealish in, and we ended up winning 3-0. So happy days. Inches. But it's the chaos. He doesn't like chaos, and when it happens on the pitch with his team, they don't like chaos. So when the first goal went in, I think everyone watching kind of thought, well, the second goal's going to go, isn't it? Like,
Real had done nothing like in the 90 minutes. It was just totally insane, and you could just see the whole thing crumbling in front of their eyes. Like, the Grealish thing, though, I don't get, JD. Like, he's a scapegoat for something that was out of his control, really.
So the best writing, probably David Walsh, Tommy Conlon and Jonathan Wilson on Guardiola and the whole City thing.
Yeah, David Walsh is very much sticking up for the team and for Pep, saying like there's absolutely no failure here. So agreeing with Pep Guardiola, who said, he's probably one of the moments he's the most proud to be in this club. So I'm guessing he's kind of seeing how his players react. But then he said he also didn't speak to his players. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma there. How is he that proud if he hasn't spoken to them about it? And so it's not about their reaction. And he said he's not speaking about it if it's a failure or not. He doesn't think that they'll be a failure if they don't win the Champions League, that they've obviously won so much and they've played in the way that they have played. And David Walsh kind of goes through his piece in the back page in Sunday Times, saying it's hard to disagree with him. If it's failure you want, you've got to look elsewhere.
It's interesting how we look at failure, isn't it? Because everybody seems to be enthralled with Guardiola's failure. Now, maybe it was the brilliance of Barcelona, but Zidane, nobody speaks about Zidane in the same breath as they speak about Guardiola. Yeah. But Zidane won 3 Champions Leagues in a row. It's
expectation, isn't it? And that's how the greats become the absolute greats. Like Tiger Woods expected to win and he wins. So you can look at it as boring in some ways then. Like the reason that we're still enthralled by Pep is that sometimes he does fail, sometimes he doesn't win, and it never becomes boring then. You get games like last,
I think it's the fact it's Man City as well, the way that they're funded and people want him to fail.
Right.
And I think people revel in the fact that he hasn't achieved, and even if they win the league this season, which they probably will now, I think that's not good enough. And I think that's the way people look at it.
We're rubbernecking the failure.
But that's the soap opera as well, isn't it? Everyone just presumes that Pep cares more about the Champions League than the Premier League. So
which I think is true at this stage. He's more or less acknowledged that himself. But I mean, it almost defies rational explanation what happened in that game. It's like Man City are an unbelievably good football team, JD, possibly the best football team we've ever seen. And if you have all these bizarre sequences of events like what has happened in the Champions League for them, like there were mad odds-on favourites in so many games that they didn't win, and it's like I can't rationally explain that.
Well, it's interesting, Tommy Collins. You can pay 100 million all you like for Jack Grealish, but despite those enormous calf muscles, he's still only Jack Grealish. He's not Bill Murray. He's not a Ghostbuster. There's almost a mystery element to what Tommy's kind of talking about. There's something in the spirituality almost to Real Madrid and the way they won the game.
Yeah, he speaks about the headlines. This is not football, declared one Spanish radio commentator. It's a paranormal phenomenon. There is no way to explain it football-wise. Front page headline on Marca demanded an opinion from an authority even higher than John Giles. Come down, God, and explain it, they splashed. The same paper in its coverage declared that City had seen a haunting, shadows, ghosts, witches. Another front page led with the headline, De Otro Mundo, from another world. And that's kind of what it was. Like, I mean, if you look at that game, what did Man City do wrong? Nothing really, but they lost.
Yeah, but he's talking about like the history of Real Madrid actually is something to stand. It actually helps on games like that. If you said that before the game, you'd be like, you're really clutching for straws to, give Real Madrid a chance.
You could feel it with the bus tour and with the noise through the TV. You could feel, this is a fortress
that atmosphere
here.
Thing again.
Yeah.
They spoke about Rodrigo as well, the fact that he was a 21-year-old born in this century. It didn't matter that he was born in the 21st century. It didn't matter that he needed history lessons to learn about Real's 13 previous European Cups. Once he put on the jersey, he inherited the mantle, he inherited the empowerment and the entitlement also. And I don't think this is a great Real side, but they do seem to have that.
Jonathan Wilson, the very sophistication and subtlety of the Guardiola model can, in certain circumstances, count against it. That his team that seeks always to impose order cannot deal with rare outbreaks of chaos. His squads tend to comprise what Zlatan Ibrahimovic mocked at Barca as obedient little schoolboys. And the biggest underthinking of all from Guardiola perhaps would be simply to sign a striker. After all, if City had converted more than one of their 9 shots on target in the first 90 minutes of the Bernabeu, the game would have been out of reach even for this Madrid. So that's Jonathan Wilson in The Observer today.
That's an interesting point because Guardiola is kind of redefining how football is played without that recognised number 9. But they should have won this game and they didn't because they didn't convert the chances that they had. Despite the fact that they scored 5 goals in aggregate, they should have scored a lot more.
I think it's also reflective of the dominance of Pep. Pep is such a dominant figure. He's the dominant figure at Manchester City, whereas Ancelotti is the inverse of that, where he is the avuncular friend and it's the players that are the...
Yeah, he doesn't really fit this narrative that the media love and we all love, because we all sit and talk about Klopp and Pep all day long. We kind of, the players are just there little puppets to do what they want with, and we don't really give them the personality and the narratives that the managers get. But yeah, he defies that because we don't really know him, talk about him, care too much about him, even though his feats have been spectacular as well.
Katie Taylor, speaking about the week.
Spectacular feats.
The best article I read today was Eamon Sweeney's in the back of the Sunday Independent. I thought it was a fantastic piece about her win against Amanda Serrano in New York last week.
It's a brilliant piece, yeah. You can go, actually.
I was just... It compares her with Conor McGregor, but not in... If you just hear that, you might think it's kind of a cheap
Here we
piece.
go.
Yeah, here we go. Like, yeah, but it really doesn't. It gives Conor McGregor credit for the things that he has done. It gives him... and obviously, you know, is honest about some of the things he has done as well. But it's showing their different ways of being Irish to an international and American audience. So McGregor's is one of version of Irishness, he said. Yet Katie Taylor's modesty, her almost puritanical seriousness of purpose, her absolute unpretentiousness, her determination not to give away too much, and belief that deeds speak louder than words may actually be a better reflection of what we're really like. Which is kind of a conceited way of looking at all of us as Irish people, but like if you're kind of, I'd take it.
Yeah.
And you know, it is, I think he ends with being like, she's one of a kind and she's ours and we're lucky she is. And I think everybody is incredibly in awe of what Katie Taylor has done.
Yeah.
Like for her sport, for herself, for her sport, for women's sport. And for the business of sport as well. Like
she's so many things. It's kind of like I think the one issue I have with this piece is that both she and McGregor are total outliers. Like Katie Taylor is like somebody who, despite you know, being of a generation that basically has abandoned the church, is a strong believer in God. She like quotes God all the time, and I just like how. He says last week a tabloid newspaper described Taylor's unwillingness to talk about her private life as controversial, as if that should be controversial. Like, what has her private life got to do with anything? But most people regard her reticence on these matters as refreshingly normal. It wouldn't have seemed odd in any other era. At a time when fame is seen as the most precious prize life has to offer, Taylor appears to have little interest in it. For her, fame seems nothing more than the inevitable, perhaps even regrettable consequence of the pursuit of sporting greatness. She does not seek fame and she does not seek sympathy. The falling out with her father must have been incredibly painful at the time, yet she kept her counsel. People piece together the story from the evidence of others. Taylor did not want to enlist public support in a personal struggle. That's also an unusual attitude these days. And she's just totally united in the nation. And
that's why the comparison to McGregor is really interesting, because McGregor had to become famous to make MMA the viable business it is for him to make the money that he has made. He was the vehicle for MMA to be as popular as it has been over the last 10 years. Katie Taylor needed to do that initially to get boxing into the Olympics, and then but she didn't do it through the fame route. She did it through, I'm just going to be really, really goddamn good at boxing, and even though the pool's going to have to catch up with me, if I'm this good, they will catch up.
Yeah.
And so she not only did that with amateur boxing to get into the Olympics, she's done it now with professional boxing, which is just an achievement that will be hard even to analyse in the moment now. Like,
it is hard.
It's really difficult, and we'll have to see if it lasts too. But if it is enduring, then it's going to be something that makes Katie Taylor an international figure for history books for a long, long time.
Massively. Like
the Foley article is totally different than JD. It's like essentially worth the hurt ? And a striking photo of Katie Taylor left soaked up greater punishment from Serrano, who landed 173 punches to Taylor's 147. Now, I'm not really a boxing fan, but like it's kind of hard to get your head around that. And he does talk about like how close the referee was to actually stopping it. I saw she was hurt to the body. She was valiantly trying to fight her way out of that corner, but getting into deeper and deeper trouble. There was a lot of concern there. She was having a lot of trouble breathing. My job that night was stay out of the way and let the fight come to its natural conclusion. It definitely could have been argued I could have stepped in there at one point, but I was trying to let the action find its own way through. She did survive that round just barely. And you do kind of, it's like two totally different articles. You read that and you're like, she took a heavy blow. Like, she took a lot of heavy blows, and she doesn't, I mean, there's talk about her and saying she doesn't want to retire. She gave him this stare when he mentioned it like 4 years ago, and now she's at 35. At some point, Taylor, 35, will need to make the peace within herself, step away from the sport that has defined her entire life. If a night of nights at Croke Park is Taylor's wish, the least anyone can do in return for her reinvention of an entire sport is move heaven and earth to make it happen. After that, the time will be close for anyone to let this extraordinary adventure go, and you just hope that she goes out in one piece.
There's Michael Griffin, the referee, speaking on Sirius Radio in that article. I think there's a couple of things I took from it. The inner fortress part, which the great French essayist, this is Eamon Sweeney Raji in Montaigne, wrote that one of the most valuable things we can possess is an inner fortress which cannot be affected by outside events. And he goes on to say the American writer Chuck Klosterman once interviewed Bono and put the U2 singer's boundless self-assurance down to the fact that Bono knows who he is. Katie Taylor's diffidence might make her seem like the opposite of Bono, yet she possesses the same steely sense of self-belief. She knows who she is too. I was lucky enough to be there in Rio. It wasn't a nice day for Katie Taylor and her entourage, her mother, in 2016, because it was the devastation of losing that Olympic bout. She was the champion. She was defeated. It was in a kind of a nondescript industrial estate in Rio de Janeiro. Her dad wasn't there. They had parted ways in terms of him being in the corner. And for her, I always thought a professional boxing for her would be an afterthought, just make a few quid. But she's now turned it into this thing, as Kevin Moore, who's writing about the business of sport, writes in the Sunday Independent. She's won 21 fights in a row now. And 6 million people watched this last week. 6 million people.
That's incredible.
Watched this Katie Taylor bout. And it's now, as you say, Sinead, she's now brought professional boxing achievements that she has made into, I think, a comparable nature with the amateur career that she had. So the inner fortress thing there was definitely something that I felt that she has got that resilience. And for anybody who's listening or anybody who's watching who might be struggling a bit today, I always think back at Katie Taylor. She was at her lowest ebb and she said, you know what, I'm going to find a different way, a different path. I'm going to fight back, and tomorrow will be brighter. And she's proven that. And I think it's an example to anybody there. You're going to have knocks in life, and Katie Taylor's had a few. And
just as quiet as she is, there's a story from Rio actually that kind of shows you her power. I was, while you were watching her, I was with Annalise Murphy waiting for her races, and there was wind delays and all of that was happening, and Katie lost. And her mother said, God, I hope Annalise doesn't find that out, because she thought, like, if she hears Katie lost, like maybe there'll be something that'll click in her brain, thinking like, if Katie isn't doing it, maybe I'll lose it. Now she wouldn't have, but she could have lost. So the power of that from one athlete's mother going, oh, I hope she doesn't know that Katie lost. So I think that the idea of her just being an enduring Irish athlete. I think there's two schools of thought now. Loads of people want the Croke Park fight. They want 90,000 people in Croke Park. They want that Irish homecoming for her. But I think a lot of people want her to go out on top and never be beaten. So she could get beaten in Croke Park. That's because the pool has improved around her. There are fighters.
Serrano was good.
Yeah, Serrano was really, really good. And people score the fight differently. It could have gone either way. People want her to go out on top, but she wants to just keep boxing. And I think, if some of the feats do include a loss along the way, obviously she wouldn't be happy about it, but I don't think she'd be happy if she felt like she was running away just because she wanted to stay undefeated. She wants to keep boxing while she can keep boxing.
And you can see comparisons with her and Honeysuckle JD. Like, they're two female athletes of extreme talent. Like, Honeysuckle wants to go out undefeated, and Katie just is Katie. She's like a throwback to another era, and what she's done for boxing is absolutely incredible. Like even the story of Serrano, like, who had never been to Madison Square Garden before, despite the fact that she's living in Brooklyn, and she earns like $1 million from the fight or whatever. It was an amazing thing.
Yeah, Eddie Hearn, once again, to be fair to him, as these guys are good, and he's got now. He's on a runner now with Katie Taylor, but he did back her at the start.
Yeah, and she did it too. Like, she sent the Twitter DM. That's she knew how she was going to go about it. Like, behind that, like, very quiet, shy persona is someone who knows what she's doing on both fronts, on the sporting front, but also on the business front. And I think if Croke Park can happen, Eddie Hearn will be the one that makes it happen. Right. And I think it will be packed. I think getting a ticket to that won't be an easy feat if she gets there. People will want to be there for when Katie Taylor fights at home.
They'll want to say that they were there 10, 20 years.
Yeah, like it'll feel that momentous, and it would be very disappointing. But I think that's that's why it will feel that momentous. There'll be so much on the line. People will feel, she'll be 35, 36 maybe at that stage. Can she win a big fight again in front of this crowd? The pressure of being home. So I think it will feel like there's a lot of jeopardy on it, which will just make it all the more exciting.
She said, I don't think I was as hurt as people may think. I wasn't worried. I obviously knew there was a tough round for me, and I knew that was Amanda's round, but I wasn't concerned or anything. I was okay. I was stable coming back to the corner. I just had to regroup, reset, and I actually won the round after that. Regardless of whether it was a tough round for me or not, I always come back and show the heart I need to actually come through. You do wonder, will she realise when her time has come, when she's like, okay, I need to retire here. And that's the tough thing for a sports person to say, like, okay, I know this is the time, because it's not in her nature to do that.
It is, against the nature, isn't it? This is the Sunday Paper Review and Off the Ball with the editor of the journal.ie, Sinead O'Carroll, and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward. We're speaking about role models there, and Katie Taylor, and Paul Kimmage is writing, Johnny, about Boris Becker. I want to be a hero, though I know heroes have short lives. Boris Becker gone to jail in the last couple of weeks for financial irregularities.
This is an amazing piece, actually. He's like... he talks about meeting Boris, and there's a great start. Tom Callahan, one of America's greatest sports writers, tells a story in his book Gods at Play about a working vacation to London in the summer of 1985. He was covering Wimbledon for Time and breakfasted every morning at a small cafe in Kingston with his wife Angie and their children Becky and Tom. On the first morning, they noticed a teenage boy waiting for a table and invited him to join them. Boris's English was still a work in progress, he says, but he and my son were about the same age and communicated easily. Becker joined us for breakfast every day that week, having no inkling he would win the tournament. I didn't ask him one question about the tennis. What a reporter. Second week, scampering through the draw, the playful puppy with the huge paws was upgraded to a contender's hotel, and my opportunity to ask him questions was gone. Then it talks about his affair with this woman that he just saw randomly, and the consequence of having a child with her, and now his demise. And it is quite remarkable that he wanted to be like a German hero. He wanted to be, I want to be a hero, though I know heroes have short lives. And there's a photo of him arriving at the Crown Court for his sentencing alongside his girlfriend Lilian de Carvalho Montero, and he's now talking about at the end the 22-year-old daughter. She's now 22. I will support him and I will visit him whenever I can. I hope that will help him a little to get through this time. And it's kind of a sad demise, JD, for what he was.
Yeah, I think people were surprised, because I think people often think people like Boris Becker, people with standing and power for whatever reason through business, sport,
will not go to jail.
They just don't go to jail, and usually they don't.
Lester Piggott did in the 80s, but it is rare, actually.
It is rare.
That line, The Simpsons, this is America, we don't send our celebrities to jail.
Yeah. And so Kimmage finishes with two opposing views. One from a letter to the Irish Times this week was saying, prison doesn't seem to be the right solution for Boris Becker, which you could argue prison probably isn't the right solution for most people who have...
Apparently he's already complaining about the corned beef that has been served. He's been complaining about the conditions in Wandsworth, because it's only a few miles from Centre Court.
And this letter writer says surely he could do more by teaching and inspiring kids in low-income communities, or do other things that his genius and talent allow for. But then Andy Murray says, look, he broke the law, and if you do that, I don't think you should get special treatment because of who you are or what you've achieved. I feel sorry for him that he's in that situation, but I also feel sorry for the people that he's affected, so his creditors, the people who have lost money with his decisions and what's happened to him. So Andy Murray is usually kind of very sensible and on the right side of these things. But
nobody thinks of the creditors in these situations.
But I think that's why probably people were shocked, remembering his exploits as a tennis player, but also thinking, oh God, it usually doesn't culminate in this. Usually there's but he didn't have to, but this is how the end game changed. So I think that's why it was probably of interest, and probably of interest to Paul Kimmage as well. Obviously he likes kind of looking at these kind of darker characters and trying to figure out what makes them tick.
He goes, how do you build a relationship when you've hardly shared a world but suddenly share a child? How do you love a daughter you've denied for a year and don't see for nearly 2? When does she become your daughter? And you're like, yeah, it's mad. And for all the fame he had, JD, he wakes up this morning as a complex and troubled man.
Yeah, in a prison.
In prison.
I think the one thing I think took about this was he talked about his agent, Jan Tiriak, his manager, and this is a 17-year-old. what other young men may ask their parents, ask him. He taught me how to dress, how to handle women. This is a 17-year-old teenager at the time. And like Germany didn't have many heroes in the 1980s. They had the football team, but there was still quite an embryonic state, West Germany. You know, they were a state effectively which was Americanized. Didn't have any heroes, had a lot of shame. You talk about the football team, maybe talk about craft work, but they didn't really have an identity. And Becker was this huge thing. And I don't think he ever really lived a reality. Like, first of all, you're catapulted, and he even spoke in the Tom Callahan about the hero worship that he got in Germany, and then he spoke, and obviously then he's catapulted into worldwide fame at 17 years of age, and he's never really been out of that bubble, as it were. And there's a degree of, sure, I'll just get away with this, and it's caught up with him. Yeah. Whereas I think of Steffi Graf, and she was born around the same time, she was able to manage her life without succumbing to the negative impulses of fame.
Yeah, but even that's like the second thing that he mentions is how to handle women. Like, you know, that was the atmosphere that he was being brought up in. That, like, you know, women are going to come along as part of this fame, as like they'll be a commodity as part of this fame, and you have to handle them. So, you know, that this is what he was learning at 17, and no wonder that these are the paths that he found himself going down. But I think that's part of the hero thing. Like, it's complex to have heroes who aren't in your same sphere. Like Katie McCabe is talking to Paul Rowan in the Sunday Times today as well, and she's talking about Roy Keane and remembering Roy Keane not celebrating the 2-2 draw with Holland.
Yeah, because they blew a 2-goal lead.
Yeah, and against Sweden, most of the Irish team celebrated after drawing with Sweden. You know, it's a huge thing to get a point off Sweden in the qualifiers, and she didn't. So she was one of the only ones who didn't. She was like, well, we let them in the last few minutes. Like, we could have come away with a win. And she said she remembered Roy Keane not celebrating after that 2-2
He doesn't seem to carry the rage, though, that Roy does have.
Probably not the full rage, but there's a fire there, I think, with Katie McCabe. But I think that's part of the hero thing. You can have a hero who's in your same field and maybe just look at what they do on the pitch, look at what they do on the tennis court. But like outside of that, I don't think sports people are, Katie Taylor maybe aside, are the people to be looking to.
No, I think, you know, your real heroes are your family and your friends, to be honest. That'd be my view after meeting a lot of these people. And
yeah, this is when he meets, Kimmage meets Becker. He's like, we start with the player, his recently published book, and the fact that it was devoid of photographs. I don't know how many millions of photographs have been taken of me over the years, and this was before the day of the smartphone, and I didn't want any in the book. He explained, an autobiography is not about pictures, it is about the story behind the pictures. It's about honesty and as much truth as you can tell without coming too close to other people's privacy. Then we put his honesty and truth to the test. 6 years before, on June 25th, 1999, he had left Wimbledon on his last day as a player and spent the afternoon bickering with Barbara, his heavily pregnant wife. She was expecting their second boy and reported that evening to the hospital with labour pains as Boris drowned his sorrows at a fashionable restaurant in London. It was getting late, the kitchen had closed. He ordered a lemon sorbet in vodka drink that caught the eye of a Russian model who was sitting nearby, Angela Ermakova. A moment later they were chatting as friends. A moment after that they were flailing at each other's clothes like two crazed animals in a quiet corner of the restaurant.
Salacious stuff.
That's salacious stuff, and that's family.
Yeah. And that's Paul Kimmage writing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great writing in the Sunday Independent today. Let's just go to something else in that paper, Sinead. Katie Liston, Dr. Katie Liston, has written about the possible integration of the Gaelic Athletic Association, the Ladies Gaelic Football and the Camogie Associations. Time to put your cards on the table. The first step to a truly united and equal GAA family is to decide what everybody means by integration.
Yep, integration, merger, amalgamation. So she goes through all the different words that are used when we talk about this debate. So we do know now that everyone wants it to happen. So it's taken a long time to get to the point. Well, the votes are there.
Is it a case that, as well meaning as the GAA might be, there's a lot of pressure at the moment with that women's sport should be equal, but there's a pressure on it as well to be.
There's a pressure, and there's, I think, an expectation that no other way makes sense. So I think that maybe a few years ago the pressure would have been there because it felt like the right thing to do, and now it feels like the smart and only thing to do.
Okay.
Like, it makes no sense that we all have to live outside the structures of the facilities that we have. And I think a few years ago we'd be talking about that's the right thing to do. Now it just has to be done. And I think we're probably in a stronger, we being like women in the two, LGFA and the Camogie Association, are probably in a stronger position now than we were maybe 5 years ago, or even a couple of years ago when these initial memos of understanding were signed. I have always been of the opinion that we need to be one organisation, because the clubs are all the facilities reside in the one clubs, and
your club is one of those.
So, as in most clubs, there's very few female-only clubs. They obviously exist, but there's very few. Most football, most ladies football and camogie teams reside in the facilities of the GAA clubs.
Okay.
There are exceptions, but mostly that we'd all be sharing one facilities. The one club initiative that people will have heard probably a little bit about, but not a huge amount, is when clubs themselves sign up to be amalgamated, so that the LGFA, the Camogie Association and the GAA, we all join the one GAA club. So say for my club in Selbridge, if you join Selbridge, you're a member of Selbridge, and that it doesn't matter if you're a Camogie player, a footballer, a ladies footballer, you join Selbridge GAA, you're insured under the one umbrella, and it worked out. You have access to facilities is equal, access to pitches is equal. So for example, if the senior football team are training, they don't get precedence over a senior camogie match, which would happen in clubs that aren't signed up to this, because the senior footballers might say, well, we have to train on the pitch we're playing on Saturday, therefore you can take your game and go to the back pitch.
A hike.
Yeah, and that happens a lot so we would play in places that, if you're at an away game and you're on the second pitch and then you look over and there's a football team training on the first pitch, because they're not signed up to one club, they don't have equity or equality of treatment. It's rarer now, but it would have been very common. But it's still, when you hear some of the stories around the country, it's still probably too common. So that's where this is definitely more urgent for some clubs than others, and obviously for counties, and just for publicity for the games themselves. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense to have three different organisations. What wouldn't make sense either, though, is for camogie and football to be brought into the GAA and then become the third and fourth sports of the GAA.
Is there a danger of that happening?
I think that's what the reticence was, for sure, on the part of the LGFA. You have to make sure that if you're going in there, you're not just going in and ticking some boxes. The executive, the higher echelons of the GAA are incredibly male. I'd say for a lot of incredibly, and I'd say for a lot of years the LGFA and the Camogie Association wouldn't have known what the commitment to camogie and football will be. I think now that commitment, even if it's not deep in their souls, it just will be a business decision, and it just will have to be done.
But it also maybe should be government led, that the GAA should be told, look, you got to make this happen, and it's got to be equal, and just sort it out. Yeah,
because look what happens in the IRFU, the mess that's there, because there's people there who haven't wanted to do it
until the new regime came in, Kevin Potts, and has been listening. But it was only after the Jack Chambers intervention that something actually happened.
So I think we're probably a bit further on the GAA. I think they know the business that's there. I think they know the popularity of it. They know the playing numbers are there, the audience is there, the sponsors are there, which is huge. Going back to Cody McCabe, the women's football team have a sponsor, the men's football team don't right now. So
that's not a coincidence either.
No,
I think female sport is, if you're a prospective sponsor, it's the place to be.
The potential is there. The Absolutely. Hockey team were getting sponsored on the back of their win.
But also on the back of reaching a World Cup final.
That doesn't mean on the back of their wins, they were getting sponsored. But the potential is there. People are getting to know. We were just talking there about Katie Taylor and Cody McCabe, and not having to talk about they're not on the women's. But they're not on the women's pages of the sport. They're just on the back pages of the Sunday newspapers.
But that's after, I think, last year, because last year was the big breakthrough, I think, with the soccer team, with Ellen Keane, with Kelly Harrington, with Leona Maguire,
Rachel Black,
with Meath footballers who won again yesterday.
Yes.
So I think now, I think people's thinking has changed, and it's a case of and Katie Liston is then talking about administratively, structurally, what are we looking at here then?
Yeah, so that is the problem. Structurally, you have to go into fixtures, and fixtures are already, Colin Work is talking about fixtures. You have to look at fixtures as a whole. So you have to make sure that camogie and ladies football aren't treated as the third and fourth thing to care about.
That line as well, where she says young girls participants in a mixed underage county development session led by a highly regarded elite hurling coach are instructed to practice with their imaginary slitters. Meanwhile, their male peers are given the actual slitters to practice striking from the hand.
Yeah, and that was a recent story that she had. That was something that happened recently, she said. So, if you go down into grassroots, there's still an awful lot of work to be done. There's some fabulous examples across the country, but then you're obviously going to get stories like that. So I think the one club structure is something that can be widened out. There's still some big Dublin clubs that aren't one clubs, which means that if you bring your daughter up and your son up, your son is probably going to get treated better than the daughter, which is kind of crazy in 2022 to be thinking that you go to a club and sign up your kids and they're not going to be treated equally. The one club means that they will be. So if your club isn't signed up to one club, have a look and see if they can be and what's the reticence to not doing it. And all of that will eventually help, I think, make the seamless integration, amalgamation, whatever merger we're ever going to do with the three entities, because that is, I don't know how they're going to do it, and the reason why we don't know is because we don't know how the negotiations are going. We have this memorandum of understanding, but we have not heard a word since.
An aspirational thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and the
resources. It always comes down to resources.
It always comes down to resources. So obviously there's a finite number of pitches. So at the moment, and every year we see a controversy over, ladies.
The Galway thing was jarring.
Yeah,
but that's honestly because you can end up, ringing around. My sister says this thing, we should do it on Twitter. Like, right, we rang this place, they said no. We rang, just call them out. We rang this place, they said no. You are at the behest of people being nice to you. So then you have to be nice back to them. So you have this kind of terrible situation where we know we should be treated equally, but we also have to be nice to the men of the GAA because they're the ones who let us borrow their pitch. Or sometimes pay, like there are training facilities across the country that are being paid for by the Camogie Association and the LGFA because they belong to the GAA. And like those GAA facilities were not built on the back of, just the men who are playing football and hurling across the country.
A lot of them they're built on taxpayers' money.
A lot of them are built on, which again.
It's great closing line as well. She's like, if not, future generations are next in the legacy line. They need to understand how now gender inequalities are reflected within the sports industry before they can be shown how to action changes in their lives at any level. In the changing rooms, volunteering as a club member or a coach or as a player, chairperson or committee, or when in a paid sports role. After all, even in our imaginations, there are only so many slitters to go around.
Well, this is the thing I always say about the One Club initiative. Like, if you tell an under 14 boy that they're more important than the under 14 girl, how is that not going to bleed into the rest of their lives? Like, if they're literally getting a better pitch, a better training facility, a better coach, access to more slitters, more footballs than their sister or their friend of the exact same age and of the exact same competition in the exact same county, how would that not change their thinking about how boys and girls
I think
interact?
As well, like, female sport is so much in its infancy. Like, the potential for progress is off the charts. Like, I think you'll get to a stage where the Women's World Cup final will be an incredibly good game, like, and you can already see it. Like, the standard of Sweden against Ireland was, like, I could not get over how good they were. And we're talking from a very low base of how long this has been going on, and it's going to get so good. Yeah,
like, I probably watch, I know for sure in my family home there's as much female sport on the telly as male. Like, my dad watches more women's golf than men's, probably. My sister watches more women's soccer than men's. So we're definitely at a tipping point for some families who have been there for longer, I guess, Johnny, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm like, well, the standard is already good enough for me to watch. I enjoy it thoroughly. Like, but it's good that we don't even really have to have that argument anymore. It's just,
I was reporting on, like, ladies football when I was starting off as a journalist, and went to a lot of the Galway games, and my sister was heavily involved, and just like the St. Brendan's, like, the ladies scene, the St. Brendan's, it was so big. Like, they were getting massive crowds years and years ago, and like, it was a real source of pride in a parish. Like, and you get a lot of rural immigration and so on and so forth, and like, the St. Brendan's ladies was such a source of pride in our community, like, and still is.
So that has to follow through then, that they have to get treated equally, and whether it comes from bottom up or top down, I think, is the big question for the amalgamation now.
Well, hopefully we'll be top down. Hopefully we'll be top down from the GAA. This is the Sunday paper review and Off the Ball. The editor of the Journal.ie, Sinead O'Carroll, and the broadcaster and journalist Johnny Ward joining me today. Hope you're well, folks out there. The handshake, I think there's been way too much made of this handshake between Brian Cody and
Well, you
Henry
say
Sheffield.
that, but it was one of the first articles that you put to my attention today.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to wake you up.
Was there too much made of it, Judy?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. I love 800 words being written
About a
a
handshake.
handshake. That's always going to be read.
It's Dennis Walsh's piece in the Sunday Times, but there's more interesting stuff about like Brian Cody's been there since 1998, and they have won an All-Ireland since 2015. And in his autobiography, Shefflin, who's the Galway manager now, wrote that there was a massive bond of trust between him and Cody. You wonder where that stands now. Cody invited him to join his management team, and Shefflin turned him down. The rejection. In Cody's relationships with his players, there's always been an absence of closeness or warmth, and yet they all craved his approval on some level. And Cody controlled their wordless exchange last Sunday. He dictated the temperature. He determined when the long, loud handshake finished.
They call it the shakedown. But it's a fascinating article because he speaks about, like, and I didn't really understand this about Brian Cody. It's almost like the implications that Brian Cody resents Shefflin for leaving his own parish, even though it's clearly stated, well, like, Cody is going nowhere. So where is Shefflin actually going to... And he speaks about, like, some of his former players who've had, like, I guess, peripheral coaching roles in the sense...
But they're not Henry Shefflin, not the greatest player to ever picked up a hurl.
They're not. And he goes... a ferocious player, Cody said. This is about Henderson, Ger Henderson, who was part of... Why did he bring him into his backroom team? A ferocious player, Cody said. In the dressing room, he was a driver. Defeat doesn't come into his vocabulary. What he said next, though, was interesting. In holding a mirror to Henderson, he was anxious to demonstrate a likeness. He was dedicated to his club at home, which appeals to me, he said. He's loyal, a Johnstown man and a Kilkenny man. I'm a village man, a James Stephens man, and I think that's the way it should be. Lots of people go around training other teams, and I can't see how they can do that too easily. And it's like... It's almost like he resents the implications that he resents Shefflin for taking the Galway job because Shefflin may win an All-Ireland with Galway.
We don't know that for certain, but...
Yeah, that's the implication.
But that's the fun of a piece like this,
Yeah.
I think. Dennis is going back and he's researched some good quotes. He's looking, going, if that was a steely stare for whatever reason, this is what might have been behind it. And has gone back to, things that Shefflin had said in his book as well.
It's interesting. Cody hasn't changed, really. He hasn't changed from the austere, hugely committed character that he was when he was leading Kilkenny to all those All-Irelands.
Or go back further from some of the autobiographies you hear of what he was like as a teacher when he was teaching these young lads in the school as well, like when they were young boys, and he doesn't seem to have changed from then either.
So...
The interesting thing is, Judy, when is, like, and I don't think, like, Kilkenny probably pound for pound aren't good enough to win All-Irelands at the moment, but they haven't regressed at all under Cody. Like, they still
I think they have regressed.
You think they have?
Yeah, I think they have regressed.
It's talent-wise, they just don't have the players.
No, but I do think it's 2015. I just think I think Kilkenny, just my own personal opinion, needs a freshness.
Really?
It needs a freshness, and it doesn't have that at the moment. They don't play for 80 minutes in games because it is 80 minutes now.
Yeah, last week I've never seen that many mistakes by a Kilkenny team.
Kilkenny can't play for a full game, and that has been the case for years. And
but they don't have the players, really, do they?
Well, but if you've got a freshness to your approach, it's like Tyrone. Like Tyrone under Mickey Hart. Mickey Hart's the most successful manager in Tyrone's history, won 3 All-Irelands, but the moment there was a freshness with Dewar and Fergal Logan, they won the All-Ireland.
It was obvious that something
needed to change, and I just think that maybe Kilkenny needs, as a county, to see something different.
And this is the interesting
because Cody can't go on forever.
They should have the talent in there as well, which is
think about Eddie Brennan's done well. He won it with Laois, didn't he?
Yeah.
Like Henry Shefflin, before any of this happened with Galway, and we don't know what he's going to do, Galway, who won 2 All-Irelands in a row with Ballyhale Shamrocks at Club All-Irelands. One of the hardest things to win. So you've plenty of players out there, former players that are talented.
And I'm sure plenty of management talent that we don't know about there as well.
Yeah, but when like, who decides? Because Cody is not apt to step down. So it's like...
It's the county board.
It's the county board, but like it's been said, I think someone said it to me recently, it was like, well, Brian Cody has earned the right to step down when he wants. But what I would say is Brian Cody was all about Kilkenny. So Brian Cody always wanted what was best for Kilkenny. When Walter Walsh got man of the match in his debut in the All-Ireland final against Galway, came off the pitch, everyone gave him a standing ovation, Cody wouldn't even look at him. Like, the player doesn't matter. It's all about Kilkenny. So Cody is all about Kilkenny, but when do they know that it's time for Cody to step down?
But it's about Katie Taylor, as you said. When is the time? I mean, how many political careers end in success? How many sporting careers can go out at the top? Very few.
Yeah.
Because the addiction, as I think Martin Brady would have called Mick O'Dwyer and Brian Cody, hopeless addicts. The addiction, and to be fair to Brian Cody, and it's an incredible manager, that it's always been about the Kilkenny more so than the players. Like, totally. It's always been about the black and amber, and very few players have been able to, like, maybe DJ Carey is the only player that he enticed back. Like, every single player, like Tommy Walsh ended up on the bench, the greatest hurlers. Like, very few players dictated when they could go.
Yeah. And
even Henry in his last All-Ireland wasn't centrally involved.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about at the top with Pep, is what does Brian Cody deem a failure right now with this current crop? Because obviously if it was with the crop that were his best team, he would think not winning an All-Ireland is a failure. Whereas what does he think now? Like, what does he expect from, is he thinking I don't have the players, or is it a failure that he doesn't have the players with the tradition and the facilities and the lack of football in Kilkenny? Like, should he always have the players? And is it actually a failure of his management and his coaching if he feels he doesn't have them? Or
he's so inscrutable. I don't know the answer to that. Do you know the answer?
No,
to that?
I'm saying none of us do. So we don't know if he's failing in his own eyes and he just wants to get back to the pinnacle, or is he succeeding? Does he think, well, if someone else had this team now, we'd be getting hammered by
the Christy Ring Cup?
Yeah.
One thing that shouldn't be lost, well, I think Matty Kenny will enjoy this article, and the days maybe of putting stuff up on the walls of dressing rooms might be over, but it's like, what happens next? Kilkenny and Galway will meet again in the Leinster final on the first Saturday in June, which completely excludes that Dublin are actually leading in Leinster at the moment. Dublin are a series force this year.
Yeah, I think one of the other things, actually, when you're just talking about fixtures, Colin O'Rourke is talking about the lack of publicity for the championship, and I heard Paul Flynn talking about this a couple of weeks ago as well. Actually, with the amount of sport on at the moment,
this monumental own goal by the GAA, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah,
like I've been saying this for about a year on News Talk.
It is.
It's the most. It's ridiculous.
Like, you actually
can't wait for August.
You actually have to really, really care about your county to try and figure out, like, when they're playing, where they're playing. Is it going to be on telly? Like, are you going to get 5 minutes, like, or 3 minutes on the Sunday game? Like, how are you going to catch up if, like, for example, I wasn't able to see Kildare against Louth. You sit down, watch Sunday game. All right, we saw about 3 scores there.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it wasn't streamed anywhere. Like, if you couldn't go, you just didn't get to see any of it. And then you're waiting till round 2. And then so that's me, who's really into it, who is going searching would have gone to Tullamore if at all possible.
And the 2 hurling games clashing at 2 o'clock last night.
Well, that's why I couldn't go, because we had a Camogie game on. So, if you're actually just someone who likes to go to these things, you need to advertise them. They need to be put up somewhere. You need to actually tell people the championship's starting a bit earlier than usual, guys.
They're being swamped by the fact that you got a Premier League title race, you got a Champions League, incredible football, and you got rugby at the moment at the business end. It just can't compete.
Yeah, the counties blame RT.
Should be
instead.
able to compete.
I just think that the calendar is too squeezed, and you're going to try to market a Tailteann Cup in this environment. It's going to be difficult.
Well, like the Derry's victory over Tyrone should have been a seismic thing, and it didn't feel like it was.
Well, nothing has felt
lost. Like,
well, it just feels a bit too like, sure, nothing counts yet, does it?
Yeah.
It's like people don't know yet. No, actually, it does count. This is it. We're in it.
People's mentality is, okay, this is a May to September thing.
Yeah.
When generally the deck is cleared. It's cleared of there's no World Cup this year until November, December. The deck is cleared for international football. There's no Premier League. There's no rugby. This is championship time, and when I know the club game is important, but when you're setting aside half the year for something that doesn't have mass appeal, don't be surprised if you're not going to get the return in terms of consumption and excitability about a championship that has been squeezed into too short a period of time, in my view.
I think they should have, if they had made the decision to do it, then they have to fully back themselves and go, wait, we can't make this a failure. And there should have been huge marketing. Like, I've barely seen anything about any of the games, and Munster hurling included, where there is actually something massive to sell there.
Yeah.
And so of all the
it's happening too quick and fast, you see. By the time like Limerick and Tipperary's happen today, normally you need a bit of time to digest it, to have the conversations, to have the chats, and then the next game's on.
Yeah.
Like the All-Ireland finals, like the All-Ireland final this year in hurling is the same day as the Open. Like, you'd have Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry going for the Open Championship at St Andrews, the 150th year of it, the 17th of July. A lot of people are on holidays. There's no build-up. There's no ticket intrigue. There's no interviews. There's no atmosphere built in a county. I just think it's self-defeating.
I think the timing could be, but it could have worked if they had put some money behind it and put some thought behind it. Whereas I think they have just kind of ran with it in terms of, like, we have a packed fixture schedule, what could work for us, and not thought of, well, it's very GAA to not think of the outside world and not think of the other sports that are happening. But I think even if they were going to go ahead with the decision, which I wouldn't probably be as strong as you saying it's the wrong decision time-wise, but if they had to do more to tell people what's happening, to get coverage, to get extra. Colin Rourke's idea was to put an extra paid for content on RT on the Monday night so that people could see the games. I'm not sure if that would work, but they'd had to do more than just pretend it's a normal season and get people, like, catch them on the hop with big games. And then, yeah, as you said, it's over before people even know it. And they're still interested in the other sports and they haven't switched over to GAA.
To be fair to Brian Cody, I was just actually calculating he won 11 All-Irelands in 16 years. So,
not bad.
So I'm just some hurler in the ditch here. So, like, you can never take that away from Brian Cody and his legacy there. I suppose because he's been so successful, in a way, it's kind of a bit of a paradox in a way that when there's a kind of a challenge in our thinking to him, then it's almost difficult to, but yeah, there's that on that one side and then on the other side. But I suppose the longer it goes on, it's now 7 years.
But the thing is, does Brian Cody wake up and look in the mirror one day and say, yeah, I'm done? And that's the thing, because Mickey Hart clearly outlived his usefulness for Tyrone, and it had to come to that, and it's kind of like an embarrassing.
And look what he's doing with Louth now.
Exactly,
and won a title.
Yeah, and I think the success of smaller counties in football is something we should, like, celebrate as well, because, like, just because you don't win the All-Ireland, and Colin O'Rourke speaks about this, he says one of the most enjoyable matches in the championship so far was between Leitrim and London in McGovern Park in Ruislip a few weeks ago. Leitrim won a dinger by 4, scoring a goal with the last kick. But it did show that playing teams of the same standard against each other at the right time of year is good for players and spectators. And I think, like, football as a spectacle, if you have, like, Galway and Leitrim today, will not be a spectacle. But if you put the right teams together, and this is, I think the championship will change in the next 10 years where it'll become more of a league system or whatever.
And in the right venues as well.
Right venues,
because these semi-finals in Leinster shouldn't be in Croke Park.
Yeah.
Like, they shouldn't be in Croke Park. Like, you know, if you brought Kildare and Westmeath somewhere where they'll pack it out, have a roaring good game with a good atmosphere, it's going to be, they're not going to fill out near Croke Park. It shouldn't be in Croke Park. Just they'll sell in a few extra tickets to Dublin fans. Like, that's not worth it. Like, let Dublin play in Parnell Park.
When Dublin knocked Galway out of the championship in Parnell Park, it was Joe Canning came on injured and got a point that, like, I'd never heard a roar like it, and the atmosphere in Parnell Park was amazing. And if you have, like, even double that crowd in Croke Park, it's nowhere near the same.
No, it's nowhere near. So, you know, leave it to the Leinster final, get the crowd then, but these matches shouldn't be there. So, you know, there's some things I think that they could be doing to make the games at the moment, even if they're at the wrong time of the year or not marketed well enough, a bit better than they will be.
I do think I would just give them a bit of time to get it right, because, like, even though, 4 or 5 months ago it was COVID, and also 4 or 5 months ago we almost had this league structure brought in. So I think I think you're right. It's just a case of, like, if we're having this conversation in a year or two's time and nothing's changed, then yeah.
Yeah, but I would say then that it mightn't be the timing that's wrong, it's how they've gone about it, I think, rather than instead of throwing the whole thing out. We
are running out of time, but it was good to see Gavin Bazunu referenced in by Paul Rowan as well, and he just talks about his he wants regular first team games and the praise he got from the Portsmouth coach. Gavin will play in the Premier League. He will be a world-class goalkeeper. That's from Danny Cowley. He made 41 appearances, keeping 16 clean sheets, the third highest total in the division. And there's actually the notion that he could go to Bournemouth, where Mark Travers is the keeper, which would be a man state of affairs. Like, we are so blessed with goalkeepers at the moment. It's actually insane.
Are we stacked with goalkeepers?
It's insane. Like, can we just play 3 goalkeepers and 8 outfielders? Yeah. Grand, like.
Or can we freeze one of them and just, like, in 10 years' time we'll take you out?
Brilliant, yeah. Where's he going to go? It's interesting to see where he'll go.
Like, where should he be playing now, JD? Like, where should he be playing next season?
Well, at least in the championship.
At least in the championship. And he was in Tala on...
Mark Travers going to be playing in the Premier Leagues.
Yeah, he was in Tala on Friday, and...
It's interesting for Caoimhín Kelleher, because Caoimhín Kelleher, I know, look, he's at a very elite level at the moment at Liverpool, and they're chasing quadruple, and even if, like, last night didn't go their way, when does he decide, I got to get some first-team football here? Because Stephen Kenny's not going to play him unless he's playing first-team football.
I don't think he's going to play him because Gavin Bazunu is in the squad. Like, he's so good. I mean, Kelleher has an awful lot to prove relative to Gavin Bazunu, sadly, and we don't know that
We just don't know.
We don't know, but, like, there's no... The evidence isn't there that he's as good as this kid, and he was at the game, the Rovers game in Tala on Friday, and like posing for selfies with young kids, like, and I was privileged. Like, I'm going to a gig on Wednesday night or Tuesday night, and it's a 23-year-old who I think is going to be amazing, and it's like it's 14 quid into Whelan's, and it's like I was at Gavin Bazunu's debut when he was 16 years of age, and I was like, holy crap, like this guy is going to be something else, and he was there to pose with kids on Friday.
Great stuff. The rugby, as you spoke about at the top, Sinead, Munster, Neil Francis, Roman Ntamak got his side back even within a minute or two. And even in that passage of play between Toulouse's first and second try, it became clear that Toulouse could do things that Munster could not even understand. That was my favourite line of the rugby commentary from yesterday. Leinster just got the job done, and there's not much to say about it. I know Bernard Jackman has written about it in the Sunday Independent today. He's kind of confident that Leinster can salvage small comfort. Munster can salvage small comfort and loss, and Leinster can control the momentum and have depth to handle Toulouse in next weekend's semi-final. So Leinster hoping to go to Marseille. Could be against Raj, could be Leinster against Raj. The power of, like, Pep we were speaking about earlier
the
on.
Headlines are all about Rogers men going through. So you wouldn't even know the name of the team by any of the headlines. The Leinster, it's interesting, like Leinster won, and all of the back pages, all of the photos are all Munster. So it's just the interest, like, Leinster's aren't interesting enough yet. And just because the games have been too easy so far. So it'll be interesting next week to see if there's a proper game there for them.
Well, the human side as well, like Ben Healy, hopefully it'll be the making of him that, you know, he had a tough day yesterday. And Munster, I suppose there's a little bit of a feeling that Munster might be coming back a little bit. Yeah,
and that atmosphere that we were talking about, you know, you obviously yesterday was an away game for Leinster, but like, would you have seen the same in the Aviva? I don't know. So yeah, there's always kind of I think a wider country interest in Munster than there is in Leinster, probably.
Or the Leinsters, is it the Leinster people who support Munster? Anything else, Johnny, in the papers that you noted, just for our listeners?
What else do we have? Don McLean gives 5 horses to follow, I think, which is interesting. We have obviously the flat.
Aidan O'Brien, just what a week he's had.
What a week he's had, and it was just mad then that Luxembourg was kind of... I'm actually at his yard tomorrow morning. There's a press morning. So
try and get one winner first, will you?
Yeah, it'll probably be like some 4-9 shot in a maiden or whatever.
I'll put the €9 on it.
Yeah, so yeah, flyers for the flat. Don gives, interesting enough, he's 5 different trainers as well, including Donnacha O'Brien, Piz Badil, who's a lovely horse as well. But yeah, Aidan had an amazing week and looks to have a stranglehold in the Derby, despite the fact that...
There was an 80-1 winner of the Kentucky Derby. Did you see that?
And I actually thought, and it wasn't in the papers, but I thought the RT reporting it was very interesting because the owner was essentially, like, American racing's in a really bad way, like, because of drugs and because of... I don't know, like, it's hard to sell. If you go to an American race meet on a Wednesday, for example, I went to Aqueduct on a Wednesday when I was in America a few years ago because my cousins live near the track, and it's an interesting experience. Like, it's the lower class of society, and I use that term loosely, but it is the lower class society where basically... Who was that?
And properly, yeah.
Yeah, and they don't work, and this is their day out. Like, they go there, and it's a really interesting experience. And they will slate a jockey coming in if he or she gave it a bad ride, and they just. But it's a real working class / lower class pursuit now. And the owner of the winner is just like, I was basically getting out of this game. I was disenfranchised with it until the trainer convinced me to stay with it, and then he has an 80-1 winner.
This was the same as the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah,
Rich Strike.
So he's what's the name of the owner? He's like basically the trainer convinced me to stay in the game. But American racing with the drugs situation, JD, is bad. It's really bad. And I know there were a lot of like unverified suggestions about drugs in Irish racing. It's not in the halfpenny place compared to America, where there are legal drugs, and then you have, you know, the Bob Baffert situation and so forth. It's in real stuck, and a lot of the race courses now survive by being casinos every other day.
Right, that's pretty depressing. The less depressing is maybe an article about the grass at Croke Park, you were saying?
Yeah, speaking of why Munster were in the Aviva, obviously Ed Sheeran, and people would probably be wondering why the concert mightn't have clashed with some of the, like say for Porky Queeve, the concert doesn't actually clash with the match, but it still can play, because obviously it takes a while for the grass to recover.
People moshing and stuff and rolling around in the grass.
They need to do more work, but Croke Park can actually recover quicker, because Croke Park now, Dennis Walsh has a piece in the Sunday Times, page 17, that actually Croke Park now have their own farm to grow their own grass, so after their concerts they can do it much quicker, because they can just replace the turf with the turf that they have. I don't know if we got that
like horticulturist turned into a horticulturist in the last few seconds.
Yeah, but so Croke Park, Peter McKenna's stadium manager, said we felt we should do it ourselves, so 5 years ago we bought a farm in Balbriggan and developed it. It's taken a while to get the ground right and sink our wells and have it so that it's self-sustaining, but we're at the stage now where we grow our own pitches. So yeah, it's not inexpensive, he says, but it means that we can replace the grass much more quickly.
And Brexit's mentioned as well, is like...
So the reason they did it was because transport delays, so that they thought with Brexit they had the farms were outside of Ireland, so they would get the grass, pack it up, but obviously if they're packing up grass they have to get it down and laid quickly, and they thought they had to Brexit proof it, so now the farm in Balbriggan now grows Croke Park grasses, so after the Ed Sheeran the new set of grass comes in from Balbriggan. So.
If I knew Ed Sheeran's music, I'd probably make a song to make a pun out of it, but I don't.
You're right in that, JD. There is better stuff out there.
There's better stuff out there. Sinead and Johnny, I hope you enjoyed the day. Sinead O'Carroll, Johnny Ward, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Galway v Leeds from JD.
And what are you going to be watching, Sinead?
Camogie League final out in Selbridge and Nice.
Yeah, well, that's home is where the heart is.
Yeah.
And, thanks so much for your time today, Sinead.
Hopefully Kildare hurling progresses the way it's going.
They did very well in the Christie Ring yesterday. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant stuff, guys. Thanks so much for coming in. Off the Ball on your radio from 1 until 7 on News Talk and on the OTB Sports app. We got 2 live and exclusive Premier League commentary games to bring you. First up, Arsenal against Leeds. Both clubs with things to play for. Stephen Doyle and Gary Breen describing that one from the Emirates Stadium from 2. Then we're off to the Etihad Stadium for Manchester City against Newcastle United. Nathan Murphy and David Myler providing the call for Manchester. We'll also have reporters at the GAA Championship games involving Limerick and Tipperary and Cavan and Donegal. If you missed any of this brilliant Sunday paper review, you can check out the podcast on the OTB Sports app or wherever you get your pods. You can also watch it back on YouTube on the Off the Ball channel. We're back on your radio at 1 on News Talk. Chat then.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.